Hey, welcome into the Hot Shop, you two. Hi. So I just wanted to let you know what we're working on. Have you ever been in here before? No? So we usually will always have something going on the Hot Shop floor. Every day the museum is open, you'll see the same team down here. These guys work full time at the museum. And we'll see them working on various projects depending on when you come in. Today we're specifically going to see some vessels, kind of like these up on the front pedestal created. Of course, entirely rainbow theme, I assume, for Pride Month. And I did ask, these pieces are going into the Museum of Glass store eventually. And I think that they were deliberating a little bit earlier on the shape that we're going to see, but again, we're going to continue to stick with that same color scheme. Yeah, welcome into the Hot Shop, guys. I was just explaining that this is our resident Hot Shop team that works here full time, and we're going to see them work on some rainbow vessels. So every time, the very first thing we start with is by gathering a little bit of glass from our furnace. So the tank with the closed door, there's actually a crucible in there just filled with clear molten glass, like a big pot of honey, really. And it sits at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. We shape this glass up a little bit and then we blow a bubble into it. So this is going to be a blown piece of glass. And then besides our glass furnace, we also have these places to reheat the glass. These large open face furnaces at every bench. They run up to about 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, so just a little bit warmer. And then most importantly for this piece that we're gonna see, we're using cane, which are these sticks of colored glass. And these are very satisfying to watch them make. They basically will create a cylinder of glass and then stretch it really far between two pipes before cutting it up into little segments. So right now we have a view of the right bench. We did have to start that bubble again. I'm not sure if anyone noticed. There's probably maybe a bit of particulate matter, maybe an air bubble, something in the glass that we couldn't continue to work with. So we started over. We just have clear glass on the end of our pipe, and we're using a wooden spoon-shaped tool that is kept inside of water to kind of smooth and even this glass out. And don't worry, you guys aren't missing anything over there. This is just a pipe cooler, trough of water that we set the pipe into to cool it down. Just gives us better leverage. We can get our hands closer to the glass. Also, this is how we prepare the cane. Right here in the front, Gabe is cutting up these segments of glass a little bit further just so that they're all close to or exactly the same size. And we're going to start preheating this cane that we have prepared earlier even further. We want to get this hot enough that it almost has a little bit of a glow to it. Not so hot that it bends and loses its shape, but just warm enough to stick. And then as soon as we're ready, we roll our bubble over top of the cane. And there are multiple ways to pick up cane. This is just one of the few techniques that we'll usually see. And now we can just work with this like a normal bubble of glass. So we'll use the Marver for a few different reasons. The Marver being this big metal table, has a thick slab of steel on top, stainless steel. And when we roll the glass across it, oftentimes we're just shaping it, but sometimes, like a few seconds ago, we're rolling the glass to kind of cool it and compress it in certain areas. And that's going to prevent the bubble from blowing out too much in that one direction. So we were blowing out the bubble more so around the pipe than anywhere else, kind of cooling the rest of it. And after a careful heat, we're hanging this down at an angle and stretching it out. And Gabe was telling me a moment ago that this is going to be sectioned off into, I believe, 3 sections and set aside so that we can make 3 individual smaller pieces of glass from this same exact patterning. So we don't have to use that cane or make the pattern over and over again. So we've sectioned the end of the bubble off, but we didn't cinch all the way down. So when we break this end section away, we're left with a small opening into the rest of the bubble, which is now basically a tube of glass. And now we can start sectioning it off for real. We'll go in, we'll squeeze down, and start breaking sections of this away into these little cups, basically. So we've sectioned off our first cup. We bring over a heated fork and pick up this piece of glass to be set aside in the garage. The silver box right here, we turned it on this morning to stay warm at about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And we'll put any piece that we want to basically like put on pause or preheat up to a certain temperature inside of that box. So this is the last little section that we're making. And then over on the right bench, Sarah started on a second blowpipe. This is a bubble of clear glass that was basically burst open on the end, creating just a collar of clear glass around the end of the pipe. So if she were to blow into the end of the pipe right now, again, that air would just pass all the way through. So the way that we can use this to our advantage, we can attach it over the opening of that cup and create a full new bubble on the end of a different pipe. So that's how we're going to pick up the other ones we made as well. We would just create a collar of clear glass around the end of our pipe, and then we would bring it over to the garage and just stab it onto the end of one of those cups. And now we can work with this like a normal piece of glass. And for those who joined in a little later, I did want to point out a couple of interesting things for you guys. So this right here, these are pieces of cane, which are basically like sticks of colored glass. We laid them out on a heated tray, which was over here, it disappeared. Must be warming up somewhere else. But we have a tray that we'll lay all the cane on and heat up a little bit, and then we just roll a bubble over top of it to pick up all the striping. And we're doing that for all of these finished pieces. We've been picking up the same pattern. So we use the torch to heat up the glass every once in a while if we want to do some spot heating, if we just want to heat up one section versus the entire thing. So we're trying to heat up the area around the pipe, and pretty soon here we're going to be making the jack line. So using the jacks, these two metal blades that Gabe has right now, we're going to squeeze down into the glass and create basically a weak point to break the piece off from. And this is done before we even finish the shape of our piece, always, no matter if it's sculptural or blown, we always create this jack line pretty early on. Looks like we also pulled a fun neck into this piece. And I know we've used this a couple of times already, but this is just folded up newspaper that we have splashed with a little bit of water usually. And this is as close as we'll get to using our hands to shape the glass, because it conforms to the shape of our hands really easily. We're just guiding which way the bubble blows out, maintaining our shape. And at this point, we're getting ready to flatten the bottom. And to avoid affecting the entire piece, we'll just heat up a small section of the glass at the very bottom before pushing usually a wooden paddle onto the bottom to flatten it. And because this piece is pretty thin, it looks like we're adding on a little pad of clear to the bottom of the piece. This is where we're going to be attaching another pipe pretty soon. And when we break that pipe off at the very end, it has a chance to break the bottom off of the piece since it's so thin. So just a little extra layer of protection. And another reason that's especially important for this piece, that little pad of clear on the bottom. Some of you joined in later than others, but we used this cane, these sticks of colored glass, right? Those are basically on the very surface of the piece. So when we break that pipe off later on, it can break off a little bit of that cane. You'll see a chip of the color taken away. So we're getting our second pipe ready. We'll bring that over and attach it to the bottom of our piece pretty soon. And we attach that pipe right to the center of the bottom. And then with the tap of the pipe, the piece is popped off. By doing this whole process of attaching that pipe, breaking it off, we've flipped the orientation of the piece. So now we can work on the top half of our vase. So this is done for every blown piece, no matter what. Bowls, vases, cups. Work on the bottom and then work on the top. And welcome into the hot shop, you guys. We are working on some pieces just like you see on the front pedestal right here for the Museum of Glass store. And I think that we're just continuing to work on various shapes, but we're still sticking with the same pattern using a rainbow of cane, which are these sticks of colored glass right here. And at this point, we are pretty far along. It looks like we've made basically a vase, and we're going to be finishing this off and putting it away pretty soon. And this is a continuous process. Throughout the day, we just continuously work on these pieces and then put them aside in our annealer, which is that large black box over there, to cool them down slowly overnight. So that's its final destination for the day today. And welcome into those who just joined. We're just finishing this vase off right here. We're just preparing to break it off the pipe now, and then we'll move on to the next piece. So applying a little bit of water near the end of the pipe, we're cracking that connection enough that when we tap it, just pops right off. We'll torch the bottom to get rid of any sharpness and make sure the bottom's completely smooth before putting this piece away. Now this box that I pointed out earlier sits at 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and with the press of a button later on when we're completely done, it'll cool everything down nice and slowly for about 12 hours or so. This is the annealing cycle, very important to prevent thermal shock. So that's the first piece of the day done. Now, for those who just joined in, I'll be able to start from the top here. So before you guys came in, we were working with some cane, which I'll point out for the newcomers are these sticks of colored glass. And basically we lay these all out on a metal plate and we'll start to heat them up just enough for them to stick to a clear bubble of glass, because hot will stick to hot. So we have to preheat those. And then once we picked all of that cane up over our bubble, we ended up with just stick straight striping, which we then sectioned off into these little cups of patterned glass. And Sarah's getting ready to pick up one of those cups right now. We were keeping them warm inside of this box at 1000 degrees Fahrenheit. And welcome to everyone who just joined in. I was just briefly describing kind of how we started our day, which we're working with cane today, these sticks of colored glass, to get this perfect, evenly spaced striping in these rainbow pieces right here on the front pedestal. And we're going to continue to stick with this theme throughout the day today, where we're making various shapes, but we're still just sticking with that same patterning. And we just picked up a little cup of this patterned glass that we're going to blow out even further into a piece. And feel free to ask any questions that you guys have. I might as well give a little overview of the hot shop real quick too. Oh, could we catch up the closed captioning, please? So everything starts with the furnace, which is the large tank with the closed door in the back, just behind Gabe over there. Inside of here, we have a large ceramic crucible filled with clear molten glass at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's kind of the upper temperature of the glass that we're working with. Our equipment gets hotter than that, but at that point, the glass is the texture of honey. If it's any hotter, it's uncontrollable. So we gathered up a little bit of clear. We picked up one of those colored cups of glass that Sarah has now. And then we have to reheat this glass to make it malleable. So we use these open face furnaces at every bench. These run up to about 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, so just a little bit warmer. So we're getting this glass nice and hot. We're actually dipping the end of the bubble into a bucket of water to cool that little ball of glass that we made on the end. And we'll use this as a handle, grabbing onto it and pulling away from the pipe as we twist the glass and blow at the same time. So using the jacks, these two metal blades, we were partially holding them open, pulling away from the pipe, which sectioned off and stretched out part of the bubble into a neck. It's pretty satisfying to watch. And then we immediately went in and we created another divot right at the top of the neck off the end of the pipe, basically creating a weak point to break the piece off from. And now we can just worry about blowing out the bottom, finishing off the bottom of the piece a little bit more. Using our pad of newspaper, kind of guiding which way the bubble blows out. Also, these colors do change a little bit as they cool down, especially the red. For some reason, when we work with red in the hot shop, it turns grayish or blackish. It'll go back to this bright cherry red once it cools down overnight. And this is because, for lack of a better explanation, there are different metals, minerals, and oxides mixed into the clear glass to get these different colors. And those metals and oxides will react differently when they're hot compared to other colors. Blue stays blue when it's hot. Red completely changes temporarily. So it's looking like this is pretty much the finished shape right here. And next we bring over a little bit of clear and attach basically a pad of this right to the center of the bottom of the piece. And this is where we're going to be attaching our second pipe pretty soon, just right to the center of the bottom of the piece. So we bring that second pipe over, attach this right to the center of the bottom. And then we break the piece off with a little bit of water and a tap of the pipe. I know, kind of magical. Now we have essentially flipped the orientation of the piece. We're now able to work on the top of the piece, flare out the top of the vase, or just finish it off however we want to. So after trimming some excess glass away, we open this up just a little bit. And this is in preparation for the lip wrap. We always add just a little rim of a different color, just a little pop of color, like some of our example pieces have. So we bring that bit of color over, just lightly touch it down onto the lip of the piece, and then as we turn, it follows all the way around. So that cone shape tool, we used it on the last piece too. I didn't point it out then, but this is called the Sophietta. The cone blocks off the opening to the piece, allowing us to reinflate the glass using a mouthpiece on the opposite end, usually puffing up something like the shoulder of the piece. So these are just some final little touches, but this is pretty much the overall shape right here. And then once we're ready to break it off, we apply water near the end of the pipe, cracking that connection. And then with just a little tap, that piece pops right off. We'll torch the bottom smooth and then put it aside in the annealer, which, just in case any of you weren't here for the last piece, this box right here sits at 900 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's going to keep that glass temporarily warm, healthy, and then we press a button to slowly cool everything for 12 hours. And that's the second piece of the day. These pieces are taking less than 45 minutes each. They're really fast with making these pieces of glass. These guys have about 20 to 30 years of experience individually that work full-time on the floor here. So not super surprising, but. And again, feel free to ask questions if you have any. And this is a continuous process, but you'll see us create a ton of different shapes throughout the day today, kind of like what you're seeing on the pedestal. Hey, welcome into the Hot Shop, you guys. I'll give a quick introduction as to who we have here and what we have going on. So we have our resident Hot Shop team on the floor today. These guys work here full time for the museum. And we're going to see them work on some pieces for the Museum of Glass store, specifically ones that we're seeing like on the front pedestal right here. Yeah. So we're sticking with the same theme, which are using these rainbow sticks of cane, all these sticks of cane in here, sticks of colored glass. We lay them all out on a heated plate, and then we roll a clear glass bubble over top of them to pick them up. So we have a little starter cup with that cane already on it right here at the center bench, and we're going to blow this out into just some sort of shape. So far today we've made a couple of vases, but we're seeing all sorts of things made. Thanks, yeah. Oh, and these are going into the Museum of Glass store. I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but they will eventually be on the shelves out there. So frequently we have specific things that quote unquote need to be made. So like there are items that are pretty popular in the store, and so we'll replenish those frequently. For example, the pineapple pitchers, those are really good sellers. The pitchers with the air bubbles in them. And then these ones, I think this is like an annual thing. We always make the rainbow themed glass around, well, during Pride Month, and then sell it during Pride Month. So there's that too. So we'll have certain ideas, but they have a lot of creative liberty. They have a lot of freedom when it comes to the shape that they make out of these pieces. So they're just sticking with that theme, the rainbow, and then they're just going wild with the shape. And they make it look so easy too. I don't know if you heard me say this earlier, but these pieces are taking maybe only about 30 minutes each, maybe even less. So these are pretty quick, and they're really thin as well. They just start with like this much glass. Well, these ones, they could make probably about a dozen in a day, I would assume, since they're making one every 30 minutes and we have 6 hours of working time. But if we're making something really complicated, like, for example, this is the thing I always bring up. It's like a sea turtle, a realistic sea turtle I've seen made in the hot shop a couple of times now. And there's so much texture to it. There's so much detail, so many components that are brought together. And those are technically probably like multi-month, multi-day projects where they work on the individual pieces, then bring them together all at once. But it still takes like half the day-ish to just assemble the full thing and finish it. So once we finish off the lower half of our shape, We bring over this little bit of clear, we attach it to the bottom, and this is flattened into a pad. This is where we're going to be attaching our second pipe pretty soon so that we can break it off of this current pipe. So now we heat up the bottom, and we completely flatten the bottom with a wooden paddle. Hey, welcome into the hot shop. So we have our resident hot shop team in here today. They're the ones working on the floor, working on some store pieces, very similar to what we're seeing on the front pedestal over here. We're sticking with the same theme throughout the day today, which is using a rainbow of cane, which are these short sticks of colored glass, like we see inside of those cups over here. But other than that, they have a lot of freedom with the shapes, so they are creating all sorts of shapes so far today. We've seen a couple of vases, and we're seeing this piece right now. This is our third piece. So once we attach that pipe to the bottom, we break our piece completely off of that first pipe, and this is essentially just flipping the orientation of the piece. This is what we have to do for all blown pieces. We work on the bottom first, and then we attach that pipe, and then we break it off. So now we can start to open this up and finish it off. And again, I have no idea what these shapes are. They're just kind of making them and taking those shapes straight out of their heads throughout the day. Yeah, so that's a good thought. So we take a molten bit of clear glass and we roll it into a dish of color. And let me show you an example. So you see these buckets on the table? Inside of those we have crushed up colored glass. So we just roll it inside of that colored glass, melt it down, and then we bring over the molten glob and we just touch it onto the lip of the piece. And then as they turn the piece, that color follows all the way around because hot will stick to hot. It's all gooey. And that creates a lip wrap. It's called a lip wrap. And we're preparing that right now, actually. Trent over on the right bench is preparing the little bit of color that'll be brought over pretty soon and attached to our rim of our piece. It, yeah, I know, it's really quick, isn't it? And right now, it might be impossible to tell what color it is, actually. They've been switching through different colors for the lip wraps, so once this cools down, we'll be able to see it a little bit better. You know what? I think this one might actually be red, though. Red, when we're working with it in the hot shop, of course, when it's completely molten, it'll look orange, and then as it cools down, it'll actually go to more of like a gray or a black. And then when it completely cools down overnight, that is when it goes back to that bright cherry red. But yeah, we always keep our glass just at about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit when we're working with it in the hot shop. We never let it drop below that temperature. Otherwise, we risk it breaking. Yes, yeah, I know. It's a long cooling cycle. And we're going to be putting this piece away inside of that box. That box has a program to it. Basically, we just push a button and it cools down a certain amount every so often for that really controlled cooling. So it's looking like this piece is done. We're just getting ready to break it off. And to break it off, we'll apply some water near the end of the pipe. We'll grab onto it, and then we just tap the pipe, and it pops right off. We'll torch the bottom to get rid of leftover sharp ends, smooth this out, and then we put it away. So that's another piece done. I think that was the third piece of the day. And let's give them a round of applause for all their hard work so far today. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, it has to cool all at the same rate throughout the entire piece of glass, and it has to cool pretty slowly, all to prevent thermal shock. So it depends on the thickness of the glass. It depends on how many connections you've made within the glass. Those are kind of weak points as well. But these pieces are pretty thin, and they're just one blown form, so these ones could technically cool faster than other pieces. Yeah. But it's usually, I always say 12 hours, 'cause it's kind of an average. Now, for everyone else who's just joined in, you joined in at the perfect moment because we're just about to start working with some cane again. And everyone who joined in earlier, you actually haven't seen this part of the process yet. We're going to lay out all of these little sticks of colored glass called cane. And this is how we're getting our striping and our final pieces today. So we preheated this metal plate. This has a bunch of grooves in it to hold the cane in place while we heat them up. And then we just lay out our pattern. And if you guys are curious enough, I do have a video I could play showing how we make the cane in the first place. But basically, we have a solid colored core to our cane. This is one example of these solid colors, just colored glass through and through. This one's an opaque one, which is probably a little bit of a better example because we're working with opaque colors. So we would take this on the end of our pipe, and then we would wrap some layers of clear around the color to add more mass and to encase the color. And then we would stretch it out between two pipes on either end of that entire mass of glass. And then we just cut it up into segments, and then we end up with our cane. And Trent's getting started on the bubble of clear glass that's going to be rolled over top of the cane to pick it all up. So starting with solid clear glass on the end of a blowpipe. The blowpipe is a lot like a straw. We roll the glass on the table to cool it down a little bit and to shape it. And then we blow into the end of the pipe and quickly cap it with our thumb to keep that pressure inside. And this quickly blows a bubble into the glass. So the cone that we're inside of right now, I get questions about that every once in a while, and it's actually mostly decorational, but it does have a little bit of a story behind it, which I love to tell. So this area, the history of it, we used to use it for a lot of logging purposes and wood processing purposes. So I think logs used to literally be sent down the waterway here, and we had these big wood burners called wigwam burners to burn leftover wood scraps, and they were shaped just like this cone, actually, dotted along the waterway here. And when everything started slowing down with that production, and when they stopped using those cones to burn the leftover wood scraps, this is an example of the cone here, by the way, they didn't need those cones anymore. They didn't use them. They used every little wood scrap. So they demolished those. They cleaned up the area. They built the Bridge of Glass, the Museum of Glass. It just, so to kind of pay tribute to what the area used to be and to give it a little nod to history, we built this cone the same shape. So yeah, it's also tilted to give us a little bit more floor space, apparently. And you can actually kind of see this visually with your arm, how much more floor space you get when you tilt one arm away. Yeah. So we have a good start to our bubble. We're letting this cool down a little bit further. We need one more layer of clear glass, and then we'll be ready to pick up our cane. So now that we have our final layer of glass, we'll come over to the center bench and pick up our cane. And this is measured beforehand with a pie divider, I think it's called. It's basically this tool they had on the edge of the table here. They're measuring the width of the bubble, and that tells them how much cane they need and if it's going to wrap around perfectly all the way around. So we have our striping. Yeah, so that bucket is actually specifically designated for clear glass only because our furnaces are specifically clear glass. So we eventually just crush up all the glass in that bucket and then we just throw it back into the furnace when we refill the furnace in general. Just completely reusing that glass. And yeah, you will notice that the majority of the excess that we end up with in the hot shop is just clear glass, so we can reuse a lot of it. And welcome to everyone who just joined in. We have the Museum of Glass Hot Shop team on the floor today. They're working on some pieces like you see on the front pedestal right here. I plugged it in so it's nice and shiny. So these are some good examples. We're working on a variety of shapes. We have not seen the same shape twice today. But we're making sure to stick with the same theme. We're continuing to work with a rainbow of cane. Cane are these sticks of colored glass. And we just picked those up, and we're going to start working with that cane even further now. So we've turned this into basically a tube of this patterned glass, and we're going to break the very end of this bubble off, which is going to open the end up, creating truly a tube of glass. You could think of this as a little bit of prep work. Basically, we'll take this tube of glass, we'll section it off into 3 or so sections, and then we'll use those individual sections to create one piece each. And that's why a lot of you guys earlier didn't see the very beginning of the process where we actually work with the cane, because we created 3 of those starts. We didn't have to work with the cane over and over again. So everyone on the floor, I think they technically have specific titles and jobs, but oftentimes they will be seen kind of switching off and giving each other breaks and practice doing different things. And I would say one of the only roles that I highlight specifically is the person who sits at the bench. They're called the gaffer, and they're like the glassblowing team leader. And that often you'll see is the most experienced person on the floor will sit at the bench, and they'll be the gaffer. But then again, they still switch off and they create their own designs frequently. They'll take turns sitting at the bench and directing the team. So yeah, pretty cool. And today, Gabe, he's the one sitting at the bench. He's the gaffer, technically. So he's creating these designs off the top of his head, it seems like, and then just getting help from those around him. But you definitely need a team to work with glass. It's very hard to blow glass on your own. So we keep sectioning this glass off. We'll pick up that little piece with a heated fork and then walk it over to the garage. This silver box right here is sitting at just about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like putting the piece of glass on pause. We could just pull it out again later on and continue working with it. Technically, as long as we need to. Yeah, as long as you're not heating up the glass too quickly or cooling it too quickly, the glass will be perfectly fine. So we can leave it in there. We'll take like our lunch break for an hour, and then we'll come back, and I think technically, yeah, we could. Yeah, but frequently, if we have multi-day pieces, oftentimes we'll cool it down in between, and then we can heat it up again slowly, or we'll keep it warm in something like this, which is basically the same as the annealer over on the wall. It just loads from the top, so it's easier to pick things up by just sticking the pipe in right in the top. So this is our last little section here. Sarah over on the right has made a collar of clear glass around the end of a blowpipe. which she'll use to bring over and attach over the opening of our piece right here and pick it up. So right now we're actually twisting the glass using the marver being this large metal table right here, kind of holding the glass in one spot while turning the pipe. The glass is twisting on itself. This is giving us the spiral that we have in all of our finished pieces. Sometimes we'll cut the end off because the color doesn't come to a perfect point or a perfect spiral at the end. So maybe there's just like a little window of clear that he was trying to get rid of. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to determine, or maybe it was just a little bit thick on the end. There could be a couple of different reasons. And now we're using the marver not just to shape the glass, but to cool the glass. Where we're rolling over the table, the table's kind of sucking heat out of the glass, and that's going to solidify it, at least partially. So when we blow, it blows out the other areas that we didn't cool down. So we're controlling how thick certain parts of the bubble are. And now we can continue to blow this out. Sitting at the bench, Gabe is guiding the bubble with this newspaper as Trent blows into the pipe. Yeah, so we actually just saw Gabe splash a little bit of water onto the glass, and this is to cool it down rapidly. He was just trying to aim it for the glass that's quite literally on the pipe itself, not for the bubble. Yeah, sometimes certain areas will get hot and then it moves around or blows out in a way that we don't want to, so we'll cool it down. We have an air gun, compressed air, that'll cool it down, or we use water. And now we can start shaping up the glass. We're starting with the jacks, these two metal blades, grabbing on and pulling away from the pipe. And this is stretching a neck into the glass. So think of like the neck of a vase. And we squeeze in one more time, right at the end of the pipe. And this is just creating a weak point to break the piece off from later on. What pieces to make? So these guys get to choose whatever they want to make for this day specifically, but oftentimes we'll have visiting artists coming in, and the visiting artist is like the director of the conductor of the orchestra or something like that. So they get to choose what this team makes, or we'll have commission pieces, so they're already given a design. But yeah, oftentimes when we're making something like store items, they have a lot of freedom to make the different shapes that they want, or use maybe just a specific color, or yeah. So sometimes we'll just hold the pipe down towards the floor to stretch the glass out. Sometimes we'll swing it, and sometimes we'll even do a full spin. But I think you could think of it kind of in the order I mentioned. Those are the intensity of the stretch. So when we're doing a full spin, we're creating a centrifugal force pulling outwards, and that's stretching the glass faster than if we were to just hang it down. And next we bring over a little bit of clear glass. We attach it to the bottom before flattening it down. And this is exactly where we're going to be attaching a second pipe pretty soon here to the center of the bottom of the piece. Our next step is flattening the bottom. So we'll focus a little extra heat just here to that clear pad. So we attach that pipe right to the center of the bottom of the piece. And then to break the piece off of its first pipe, we just use a little bit of water that thermally shocks, cracks that connection, tap the pipe, sends a vibration to those cracks, it just pops the piece right off. I know, looks like magic, but it's science. So next, because we have essentially flipped the orientation of the piece, we can start working on the top half of the piece. We can open it up, we could flare it out, do whatever we want with it from here. Oh, and I get asked every once in a while if these different places where we're heating up the glass are like different temperatures or if there's something different about them. We just have two places to work at the same time, oftentimes, for this exact reason. See, we're heating up glass over on the right to eventually bring over to the center bench and attach to this piece. And at the center bench, of course, most importantly, we're working on the piece itself. So we trim just a little bit of glass away. This is usually getting rid of some thickness. So we brought that little bit of colored glass over, we lightly touch it down on the lip of the piece, and then as we turn, it follows all the way around, and this is creating something called a lip wrap, which you can see on some of our finished pieces right here, basically just a rim of another color around the opening of the piece. Then we just continue on opening this up to its full size. So these pieces are usually annealed for about 12 hours or so, and that's kind of a standard cycle that we put a lot of our pieces through, unless they're really, really thick or if they have a lot of connections. Then it can be up to, I've seen in this hot shop, up to like 3 or 4 days of cooling. Yeah. And now to break the piece off, we apply some water near the end of the pipe. We're completely done with this piece. And then with just a tap, that should pop right off. And then we just torch the bottom, get rid of leftover sharp points, and we are done with this piece. And let's give them a round of applause for finishing that piece. And could we catch up the closed captioning, please? And could we have the cane pulling video? So this is a video I like to show when we're working with cane, and I think I mentioned it to some of you guys earlier, but this is how we make the cane itself, these sticks of colored glass. We start with solid color on the end of our pipe, which we wrap a couple layers of clear around. And then we form this into a cylinder usually if we want just a perfectly round cane. Attach a second pipe to the opposite end before stretching it between the two pipes. And this is stretched all the way across these wooden ladders just to prevent the hot glass from touching the cold concrete. And then this is simply broken up into perfect size pieces for our project. It will depend on the project. And then this is very similar to what we're doing today. We then create a clear bubble of glass and roll it over top of the cane to pick it up. And this leaves us with stick straight striping, which we can then twist and we can alter in so many different ways from that point. And then it's on to the next piece. So for those who joined in a little bit later, again, we are working on a variety of shapes and sizes of these pieces right here on the front pedestal. So far today we've seen 4 different pieces, all different shapes. The recurring theme today though, we're working with rainbow cane, cane being these sticks of colored glass to get perfect striping. And we already have the pattern on this piece of glass that we just picked up at the center bench right here. So now we just have to work with this piece of glass to turn it into a finished piece, like a vase or a bowl. And can we have a view of the center bench, please? Hey, welcome into the hot shop, everyone. See a few new faces here and there. We're just getting started on the next piece, which is going to be something like what you see on the front pedestal here, just various shapes and sizes. But a recurring theme is we're working with cane, which are those sticks of colored glass to get striping. We already have our striping on this piece. We're just going to start working with it to actually blow it out and turn it into a vase or a bowl or something similar. Everything is running between 21 and 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, all running off of natural gas. And we have a couple of different pieces of equipment that I should point out. We won't use this for a little while, but the tank with the closed door in the back, that's actually where we're getting the molten clear glass itself. There's a large crucible just filled with molten glass at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. So I was trying to figure out what Gabe was doing here. He's heating up sections of the bubble, which this is now a bubble. It's enclosed on the end of our pipe of glass. And again, we had stick straight lines on it, right? So we're heating up a band of glass all the way around, and then we're holding onto the end of the glass and we're turning the pipe. So we're twisting it pretty harshly in one direction. And then we heat up the next section and we twist it again in the opposite direction, and we keep doing that. This is called, I don't know if they call it something different in the hot shop, but this is called a wig wag from what I've seen. Yeah, so it's still called a wig wag, but kind of a self-explanatory name, right? The glass is wig wagging back and forth to create this really interesting pattern, this striping. The perks of sitting in the front row. Yeah, you can feel the heat coming off of it. The glass always has to be somewhere around or over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit when we have it on our pipe. If it cools down much further than that, then it'll start to crack and break off. So yeah, it's pretty warm. I actually get that question a lot. The pipes that we work with, stainless steel is apparently a relatively poor conductor of heat, so the heat will only travel maybe about this far or so down the pipe. It's basically however much we're sticking into the furnace is what's going to get hot. So we can handle the pipe pretty close to the glass. Yeah, so we have two different kinds of pipes that we generally use in the hot shop. One of them is hollow, one of them solid. This one is a hollow blowpipe. So we're actually able to blow into the pipe like Trent is right now, and that's expanding the glass like a balloon. So we'll blow this out. We usually want to thin out the glass near the pipe first. We want to leave the bottom a lot thicker. So we're controlling how much of the bubble is blowing out on the bottom by using this pad of newspaper. So yes, this is just folded up newspaper. We splash it with a little bit of water and then we're good to go. So we preheated and are now using the jacks, which are these two metal blades. We squeeze down with these blades off the end of the pipe to create a purposeful weak point or breaking point. And you can see that pattern a lot better now that we've blown this piece out and the glass has started to cool down, showing more the true color of the glass. So at this point, we're flattening the bottom. This is exactly when we need at least 3 people helping with just one piece, because behind the scenes, Trent was kind of capping the end of the pipe, keeping that pressurized air inside of the piece. We're pushing a wooden panel on the bottom, and we're keeping the jacks on the side of the piece. All of this is necessary to create this really nice, crisp angle on the bottom. It would be impossible otherwise. And when I was over there, Gabe was just describing to me, again, the different colors will have different, basically, viscosities because they have different metals and minerals inside of them to get those colors. So some softer colors tend to be blues and greens, and black is like really soft. Harder colors would be white and yellow and orange. So just something that they have to control throughout the process. They're really trying to push it into the exact shape that they want instead of it blowing out how it wants to. But yeah, we have flattened the bottom of our piece, meaning that the lower half of the piece is basically complete. So we'll bring over a second pipe pretty soon and attach it to the center of the bottom of the piece. So you'll actually see us use this again later on. This is what we've been using to keep pieces of glass warm or preheat glasses up to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So whenever I say warm, it's usually 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But we have those patterned cups of glass that have the cane already on it. We just pick it up on the end of our pipe and then blow it out from there. We created those cups earlier before a lot of you came in. And then all of our other boxes that we have, these are our annealers. And the annealer is going to slowly cool the pieces down. This is the one we're using today over on the far wall. It sits at 900 degrees Fahrenheit. And we basically just press a button. It's programmed to cool a certain amount at certain time intervals. Yeah, depending on the thickness of the glass. Yeah, so these pieces, we'll probably cool them overnight, about 12 hours or so. Yeah. And here we've just attached that pipe to the bottom of the piece. And then to break it away, just thermally shock that connection and tap the pipe in some sort of way, and it just pops right off. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I can't quite hear you, but were you asking about like if they have a specific design that they're basing their pieces off of, basically? Yeah, so these pieces in particular, the only part of the design that we're sticking to is the pattern and color combo. So we're just making sure that all of our pieces have this rainbow striping. Other than that, they are totally just kind of, I think he's just pulling these designs right off the top of his head. Yeah. And just making whatever shapes he wants. You know, this is actually one of the hardest shapes to make out of glass right here. Low bowl. It's hard to describe why it's even hard. Everything about it is hard. Yep, so we just created something called a lip wrap, which is basically just a rim of a different color around the opening of the piece. And all it takes to do that is we just lightly touch the color down on the lip, we turn the piece, and it follows all the way around. Hot's going to want to stick to hot, so as long as we keep that bit of color nice and soft, we can wrap it around. And now we finish opening this up to its full size. So once we finish the piece, same thing as always, water that connection to crack it and then knock it off. And we are actually going to completely stamp the bottom of this one, it looks like, usually with the Museum of Glass logo for the store. And then we are finished with another piece. And this goes off into the annealer to cool down overnight, or about 12 hours or so. So there's another piece done. Thank you, everyone. So if you haven't seen the very beginning of the process yet, Gabe just told me that they're going to be picking up some cane again pretty soon and actually working with the cane itself to create those little starter cups. And welcome into the Hot Shop to those who just joined in. We have our resident Hot Shop team here, or our full-time team for the museum. They're working on these pieces that you see on the front pedestals, basically just making a variety of shapes and sizes, but sticking to the same theme, which is this rainbow striping pattern. And we're actually just about to create that striping pattern again from scratch, starting with these pieces of cane, which are these sticks of colored glass that you see inside of this box here. So yeah, we'll heat up this metal plate with grooves to hold the cane in place, and then we'll just lay out the pattern that we want, and then roll it up over top of a clear bubble. So we preheated that metal plate and we're laying the cane out now. We'll let this just kind of sit here and warm up slowly. And in the meantime, we are preparing the bubble over on the right bench, it looks like. I think we have to have 3 layers of clear on this bubble or so, and then we'll bring it over to roll over top of the cane. And feel free to ask any questions that you guys have. I even have a video that shows off how we make the cane in the first place. So this is where we're getting all of our glass in the first place. If I didn't point it out to you guys earlier, the tank with the closed door has a large ceramic crucible in the base of it filled with 2100 degree Fahrenheit molten glass, specifically all clear. So we have to add our color through various means, like the cane today. One common way of coloring our glass is through color bars, so solid colored pieces of glass like this will melt down and kind of layer over top of a bubble. So we actually start with this for cane as well. We basically just attach this to the end of a pipe, probably a larger amount than this, to be honest. And then we start gathering layers of clear over top of the color to kind of protect it. The color is basically just a core within clear glass. And I could show you an example closer up, but then we attach a second pipe to the opposite end, and then we stretch all of the cane out between the two pipes before cutting it up into segments. So yeah, we start with this solid colored glass. This is just different metals, minerals, oxides that are mixed into clear glass to get the color. And we don't make the color ourselves. We get it shipped in that bar form right there. So we have set up this bubble right here. We've blown it out a little bit more. We've gathered 2 layers of clear at this point. We're going to let this cool down for a second. And we're actually using a pipe cooler at the moment as well, which is a trough of water that we set the pipe into. And then I think we just need 1 more layer of clear, and then we'll be able to pick up our cane. So whenever we get our layers of clear, it's really interesting. We measure basically based off of gathers. So 1 gather is usually going to be about this big, and then 2 gathers, and then 3 gathers, and it grows kind of exponentially because usually we're expanding the bubble a little bit as we go as well. So we have more surface area to cover, and we end up getting a really big ball of glass at the end. So yeah, it's not like we're measuring as we go or anything, but these guys are so experienced that they are able to just kind of gauge how much they need for a piece. So, my gosh, everyone kind of has their own learning curve, right? But I would say 5 to 10 years makes you more of a professional. Yeah. The people that work full time here. Yeah, so at this point we've picked up our cane. We roll it on the marber to make sure that it's all conforming to the bubble. And then we'll be able to come to the center bench and actually blow this out, turn it into basically a tube of glass, which we'll section off and use for multiple individual pieces. Yeah, it's always hard to determine the color of the glass when we're working with the glass, so we always have to choose the colors carefully beforehand. It's not like they change while we work with them. It's usually you pick up a piece of color bar. This is the color you start with. This is the color you end with, no matter what it looks like when we're working with it in the hot shop. There are some colors where that's not the case, but not today. And welcome into the hot shop, you guys. So we are working on some pieces like you see on the front pedestals on both sides of the hot shop. The idea is that we're sticking with the same theme of creating rainbow striping in our pieces, but we're just changing up the shapes for every piece that we make throughout the day today. So we'll see how this next piece turns out. This right here is a large tube of glass that has this pattern of rainbow striping. We're just going to section this off, I think, into 3 pieces so we can make 3 smaller pieces out of this one large bit of glass. So first things first, we need to actually open this up on the end so we really do have more of a tube and less of a bubble. So we section the end of the bubble off, and then we completely break this end section away by giving it a tap or a whack. So now we have a small opening in the end. So we open this up into a nice straight cylindrical tube, and then we can start to section this off. Yep, so we just keep sectioning this off, but each time we're sectioning it off, we're never cinching all the way down. We want a little bit of a gap so that when we break this cup off, we could just open it up right away for the next cup again. And I will point out real quick, we are putting all these cups inside of the garage, the silver box right here. And this is where they're going to be held at just about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit so that they don't crack and break from thermal shock. And then we can just kind of pull them back out later on and use them for our finished pieces. And there's a flame in the corner of that box. Yeah, so far today we've been making a lot of vases, which are a little bit of a bigger vessel. They take more effort. But since we have, well, 1 minute till 1 p.m., we're not going to finish this in 1 minute, but it's fine. We're making a cup out of this, like a drinking glass. And this is a little bit of a smaller piece of glass anyways than the sections that we've set aside. So perfect amount of glass. So first thing we do, we stretch or lengthen this bubble by holding onto the end. We're turning the pipe, we're blowing at the same time. All of this is both twisting the glass and expanding the glass. And next we create the jack line. Using the 2 metal blades, we squeeze in off the end of the pipe and create a weak point to break the piece off later. Yeah, we still have a lot of blowing and shaping for this little cup here. And this is just a very exciting way. No, it's a faster way to stretch the glass out, get a little bit of a longer shape. Using centrifugal force to our advantage. And then we continue to blow this out a little bit further. And we already did start to flatten the bottom a little bit. We just use our wooden paddles to do this. And I like to point out, whenever we flatten the bottom of a piece like this is exactly when we need 3 people working on our team at least. Somebody will be blowing or capping the end of the pipe, keeping that pressure inside of the bubble. Somebody's going to be on the side of the piece with the jacks, straightening out the side. Somebody's going to be flattening the bottom with the wooden paddle. And this is the exact moment that we need 3 people. It's really hard to make anything on your own, even a cup. So now we've finished the bottom of our piece. We'll bring over another small pipe and attach this to the center of the bottom of the piece, and then we'll break this entire piece off of the pipe that it's on right now. So now we attach that pipe to the bottom. And then when we're ready, we break the piece off of the pipe with a little bit of water and a tap of the pipe. And something cool to point out, which I'm sure you guys have all noticed already, in the beginning when we first started working with this bubble, it was all just glowing that orange, bright orange, yellow, hot color. Now that it's cooled down and we've blown it out, we can see the true colors of the glass a lot better. And of course, expanding that design does help. The lines have gotten a little thicker by doing that. So same as all of our other pieces, we're preparing a lip wrap, which is basically a bit of color that we'll bring over, and we'll just touch down lightly on the rim of the piece and wrap it all the way around. So we have prepared this enough that we're able to bring that color over, lightly touch it down, and then as we turn the piece or the pipe, that color follows all the way around. And now we just continue to open this up like normal into our straight-walled or cylindrical cup. So to prepare to break the piece off, you'll usually see the artist torching the glass connecting the piece and the pipe together. So just that little bit of clear that's wrapped around the pipe until we see some movement in that connection. Then we know that it is safe or ready to apply water, crack that connection, pop the piece off. So we're getting pretty close here. Next step is actually breaking it off. Thermally shocking it with some water. And then just a tap of the pipe, and that pops right off. Or it should, yes, there we go. When we torch the bottom, get rid of those marks that are remaining, and then put the piece away in the annealer. And this is where it cools down overnight with everything else that we make throughout the day. And let's give them a round of applause for finishing that piece. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad you guys all got to see something made. And we'll take our lunch break now. We'll be back in just about 1 hour. We'll have the official return time posted on the screen, which you can also see in the Grand Hall. And yeah, we'll see you soon.